right, back to Betty Block and Ingrid Inline. They are employees of the Box Model Construction Company that we met in video number 7. This is video number 8 in the series, so if these don't make a lot of sense on what we're talking about, then I highly advise going back 1 through 6 because it will help you a little bit. We are going to talk about in this video, we're going to talk about display property as well as border property, and we're going to practice a little bit with the behavior of inline and block elements. We are heading somewhere because eventually you're going to want to style your website and you're going to be able to move and position elements on your page, and understanding these core concepts will help you be able to put a heading where you want to put it, put a picture where you want to put it, maybe put a text body somewhere. I could not control my elements when I first started coding. I tried to make websites and they just look like this. Like, this is what my website looked like. I got the code right and I didn't quite understand why nothing was moving or why I couldn't quite position it correctly in the Viewport. So that is where we're going to ultimately head. I'm going to show you how to code a very, very, very basic website using these concepts. So hopefully you'll be able to do one on your own and feel super proud of yourself that you actually did a website from start to finish and made it somewhat look like you wanted to. It might look like it's rocking from the 90s, but hey, it'll be functioning and it'll look cool. And that's about where I'm at too. I mean, I'm not much past that. I understand a few things conceptually beyond that, but all right, so first things first, we are going to talk about the properties. We're going to skip ahead. I have not completely introduced the characters yet or the employees to CSS. We are going to get there, but hopefully by the time we get there, it'll make a little more sense what the characters are doing. So we're going to go back to W3 Schools and start there for this particular video. And we're going to go to CSS because we're going to move into her behavior. Remember, CSS is the decorator. She comes in and she makes things more colorful, more interesting, more full of life for the architecture that Mr. HTML has created. He's creating the walls and the furniture. The CSS is going to go in and style those particular things. So a lot of the ways that they style things, we've talked about that a few videos back, but you're going to want to go down to CSS references, and well, maybe that's not where I want you to go. Where is it at? Go. I think it's here. Okay. CSS reference. I could not remember where it was, so I had to pause my video there for a minute. All right, so you want to go into CSS reference, and on the left, there's a whole bunch of these things called properties. The property value pair, to me, works fairly similar to the element and attribute pair. You're not going to understand a lot of that yet. I'm going to have a whole separate video, a couple videos on that, so hopefully you'll be able to get a little bit better at that. But just for now, know that this is where you find them. And these are Mrs. CSS Decorator's tools. These are all going to be in her purse. So when she comes into the laundromat, she's able to take these particular tools and use them to make things really, really pretty. So we are going to talk about this property called display, okay? And I found that under D here. And display property says it specifies how a certain HTML element should be displayed. So that's really honestly what we have been talking about with the inline and the block elements. We have been discovering and looking at whether or not they fall in the top left corner of the viewport, or whether or not they're going to fall in line with other particular elements. And we're going to talk more about that. If that blew your mind, please go back and watch the previous videos, because that will help you out with that. But we're talking about their default display values, what they actually are. Remember those super genius guys that give all the prepackaged information to the tags so that they have power to be used by Mr. HTML architect? Those are the default display values. We have options to change those, which is the power of CSS decorator. We can change them to none, inline, block, or inline block. We're not going to go to none yet because I honestly haven't worked that much with it. So I'd have to play around with a little bit more to see what the behaviors do. I mean, we can if the video doesn't go long, but don't forget this try it yourself button is really, really cool. I spend a lot of time here. This one for me was still pretty confusing though. I was like, okay, all right. I still see a lot of words. I don't know what's going on. I got some nones. I've got some inlines. I've got some blocks. I've got some inline blocks. Way too much for me. So I got a little bit of a feel from this one, but then I went back into CodePen, and that's where it really helped me understand what was going on. Okay, so I'm still working the same code that I've worked with for several videos, just because it's something that you're comfortable with, because I like to see how the changes are affected by different properties. So I don't like to change a lot in the actual HTML framework. I did make it so that the content just says block element or inline element. And as a reminder, the red, the orange, and the yellow are all block elements. And then the blue, the purple, and the green are all inline elements. Okay. We already used one particular property in CSS. We used background color. So that one would also be available here on this list because it's a property. It's a CSS property. So that's how I got all of the different colors to go to what I did, okay? So now we're gonna use that other property that we were just talking about, the display property. Okay, so we have display. The default display value of the P element, the red element, is block. I don't have to code that in. It just comes prepackaged with the tag. But say I want to change it. Well, no, let me show you. Let me show you first. That way you believe me. Okay, I'm gonna type display because that's the property that I got from W3 Schools. And I know that I have 4 options here. I could go none, inline block, or inline block. So let's just do block because that's the default value of a block element. Nothing changed. So to me, that says, okay, the default value is true and accurate. The tag is working like it is supposed to be working. When nothing changed in my code, a lot in the beginning, I panicked. I always just assumed that I had missed something or I had done something wrong, but that's not always the case. So once I was a little nicer on myself mentally, like it's okay. I just need to understand why nothing changed. That was a big deal for me and kind of changed my line of thinking. All right, so let's change this to inline because that was one of our 4 options. Oh my goodness, look what happened. It actually started to behave like the blue, the purple, and the green elements. Okay, that's pretty cool. We're just gonna do block and inline right now. We're not gonna mess with inline block, okay? So let's go down to H1, and I'm gonna do the same thing. The orange element is the H1, and by default, it's set to block. Okay, so nothing changed, and that's not a bad thing. That just means that the tag is working and it's set to its default state. So I am going to change that block value to inline, and that way we can see what changes. Okay, quite a bit more change there, and I want to show you that again because that's a pretty key concept, and that will get you all mucked up when you're trying to build your website. All right, so when I have just one inline element and it happens to be the first inline element, it fell still to that top left corner, our start position on the viewport. But now I'm going to take a block level element and change it to an inline element. All right, so that orange one then came up to the line before and it actually connected or stood next to the red block inline element. Pretty interesting behavior when you watch it. Okay, let's try this. We know that by default, the list element is supposed to be a block element. So let's see if anything changes. Okay, nothing. All right, so let's try to go and change it now to inline. Oh my goodness, we have some magic happening now. Okay, so now I have 6 inline elements. I've only changed 3 of them because they started as block elements. The red, the orange, and the yellow started as block. So I had to change them to inline because I had to force their default behavior to change. The other three, the span, the image, and the button, I didn't have to change anything because their default behavior was already in line. So they're all literally in line with each other now, okay? Now let's watch what happens if we try to change the span. Well, let's set the default first. We know the default of a span element is inline. Oops, I wrote it wrong. No one caught me on that. Okay. All right, so that is an inline element, not a block element. The default is inline. Let's see if that changes anything. Okay, doesn't change anything. So let's set it to block and see what happens. All right, it jumped down to the next line and it's stretching from left to right, just like a block element should. So the behavior is correct. It's doing what it's supposed to be doing. Pretty cool. Image tags are weird. So sometimes I still don't know always what the expected behavior is going to be, especially because we don't actually physically have it linked up to an image. We're just pretending that we're sourcing it to something over in the HTML code, but we didn't really do that. All right, let's set it to its default, which we don't have to because the tag comes prepackaged, but let's see if anything changed. Okay, nothing changed. So that means the prepackaged value is working. The tag is doing what it's supposed to be doing for that particular box. Okay, let's now change it to block. Okay, I don't even know if you saw that. It was so small and so little. I'm gonna do that one more time. Notice that the green inline element is still next to the orchid, to the purple one, to the image, little tiny square, because it's still set to the inline default. But I am now going to change it to block. And the green jumps down because that image is supposed to be taking up the entire space, okay? When we get to the border property, we're going to check to see if that's doing that or not. I can't definitively tell you that because I'm not as familiar with the image behavior as I am some of the other ones. So just for now, know that it at the very least knocked down the green button box. Okay, so let's go down to the button, and this is also an inline element. We're going to do it again and prove that if you set it to inline, absolutely nothing changes. And let's go through and change it to block. Nothing happened. Okay, so there must be something probably with the way that image behavior works. I'd have to go back and actually figure out what that was. I wonder what would happen if we put the button, we move the button. Let's move the button between the span and the image instead. And this is part of the cool thing about doing it this way with color is you can kind of control the behavior, watch the behavior, see what it's doing, note take. I mean, it's a slow process, but for me, going through all of this actually helped me get faster because I was really learning it and not just practicing someone else's code or there we go. So that looks a little bit more like display behavior. I don't know, maybe the button just doesn't do those particular things. So let's try that again. Because it is a button. We have a button and an image, and they may work a little bit differently. A little bit of a smoosh went down. I don't know if you can even see that. Let me zoom in a little if I can. All right, so we're gonna set it to its default value. A button's default value is inline. Okay, nothing changed. Okay, switch it to block. Tiniest adjustment there. I mean, I was like, you'd almost need to have a microscope to see the difference in that change. But it's affecting it somewhat. I'm not good enough at code to even know or understand what's going on, but those are going to be something that I note and have to look up a little bit more. And so maybe I can make another video on that down the line as I actually learn it myself because I don't know right now. All right, so let's move on, and we are going to do something else really wild and crazy here. We are going to take off the background color because we've worked with that for probably 7 or 8 videos now. Let's look up another property in our CSS because I know we have a bunch that we could choose, and we are going to go to border. Okay, this is one of the box. This was really confusing to me because I didn't understand that similar to attributes, if you put something in as a value and you put spaces between it in CSS, that you're actually setting different things. So it says I have a border that's 5 pixels, it is solid, and it is red. Okay, so you can again go to try it yourself and you can see a little bit more about what that is doing. I'll have a whole nother video on the box model here coming up, but just know for now that the border does exist even if you cannot see it right in the code. Right now there's borders. We just see background color. We just see content, but we don't see any actual borders or padding for that matter. Because we have content and then we have padding and then we have border. But let's go ahead and take the P element and we're gonna set a border property. We're gonna set it somewhat large so you can see it hopefully. We're gonna set it at 5 pixels. Let's make it, I'm trying to think of a color you'll be able to see, teal, and then make it a solid border. Okay, I'm not sure if you saw that or not. I'm gonna take the background color off in a minute, but it went ahead and it set a border. Okay, I'm gonna make it even thinner because I don't want it so thick that it throws off what we're doing here. But since we have a border set on that particular element, I'm going to take off the background color, which you can do that. Okay, so now I just have a block element. And I'm going to do the same here. I'm going to set them, oh, you know what, I should probably set them the same color. That way we're sticking with our plan. All right, so I'm going to set the border here. And I'm going to keep it orange. I'm going to keep it 1 pixel. And I'm going to keep it solid. And I'm going to take off this. Now notice that I put them in different orders. And under the P, I put 1 pixel, red, and then solid. But then down here, I put orange, 1 pixel, and then solid. Seem to still work. So order there doesn't seem to matter. Order does matter in certain things, especially in the order of CSS as the machine reads it. But when you're setting border properties, much like when we were talking about the grid containers, the order doesn't seem to matter. All right, let's go and take off the background color here. And we are going to set it as a border instead. We're going to keep it yellow. Let's put solid first and see if our theory works. See if really messing up the order will change it or not. Oh, that's so hard to see, but it's there. So it didn't matter. You know, you can change it. You can have a little fun. I'm sure there's some kind of standard way to do it. I don't know what it is, but okay. Same as the inline. Well, you know what? Let's put these back to default. That way. We actually see what they are like in their default state. Let's take this all the way off, that way I don't confuse you by leaving it empty. And take off these properties. Okay, we're going to add another border. We're going to put blue and teal. No, we need blue. Why did I write teal? Blue, 1 pixel. Solid. Take this default state off. And we're going to change the border to orchid, 1 pixel, solid. And again, it doesn't matter what order. Take that background color off. And we're going to do the same thing here. Change our button to the border, and the button is green, 1 pixel, solid. I'm curious to see what it does to the button. Okay, I'm going to zoom in to show you that we keep a lot of the same visual. They still the visual look is very similar. Now they are just surrounded. I think sometimes this is even a better way to understand what's happening with the properties. So we have 3 block level elements that span from left to right. They're just outlined instead. And then we have 3 inline elements that span, they fall in line. Let's just change a couple of these. We're going to go up and change the border back to inline, because that's not its default state. It's the opposite. Okay, and that changed it there. And then let's try the P. Let's change it to inline. Okay. All right, now there's another particular value that you could put in for those displays that we have kind of ignored. And I would say a lot of times I see these in code. I don't know. I actually asked a question in class about it one day, because to me it seems like it's the most user-friendly. But we've set it as inline, we've set it as block. We can also set it as inline block. And to me that says, okay, that's going to take the behavior of both of them. Let's see what that says though. I think that there's some explanations down here. Inline block. Okay. Inline block is the value that we're going to set to the property. So the property is display. The value is inline block. And then the description of the value. Oh, I hate that responsive. That's terrible responsive nature. Displays an element as an inline level block container. The element itself is formatted as inline element, but you can apply height and width values. And that's why I was telling you to be careful with Ingrid Inline. Ingrid Inline by default, you're not going to be able to apply certain values such as height or width. But if you want to keep an inline element for whatever reason and be able to set those values, then you could set it as an inline block. So that helps give you more control over where things go on the particular page. Okay. All right, I think that is it for this particular video. The next one, we are going to take a look at a little more of the box model, setting padding and margin and borders to see what that has an effect on the live code. So stay tuned.